Yes, and welcome to those on Zoom as well as those on YouTube. Thank you so much for your greetings in the chat. All right, so let's begin. So, improper eating and cause of diseases. As I said before, this is a very, very big topic. Many persons I've seen where when diseases, it is traced back to nowhere else but to what we do with our bodies. All right, so a heritage of degeneracy. And I'm going to share with you some striking information. Is Psalm 139, verse 14 says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And man came from the hand of his creator, perfect in organization and beautiful in form. So we were perfect. We were fearfully, we were wonderfully made. We came out so beautifully. But what happened? Something happened, right? Something must have happened along the way. Sin crept in. And through sin, we have degeneracy. It says, through the successive generations since the fall, the tendency has been continually downward. Disease has been transmitted from parents to children, generation after generation. Even infants in the cradle suffer from afflictions caused by sin and sins of their parents. And we'll go into that. What do you mean? What do you mean about infants suffering because of the sins of their parents? We're going to go into that shortly. So, for example, here's a picture right here. It shows where this baby, newborn baby, they call it a miracle baby, was born with an immense tumor. This baby hasn't started eating or drinking, physically as yet, choosing for themselves. So we see a great example of this. What would have caused this? This definitely is due to a pass down. And as I said, we're going to go into that. It's that serious to understand not only the causes of diseases, but what we can do to prevent those diseases. All right, so we see through the Bible that as time passed, diseases were passed down. And look at this information. It was so thrilling, yet sad to see. It says Moses, the first historian, gives quite a definite account of social and individual life in the early days of the world's history. But guess what? It says we find no record that an infant was born blind, deaf, crippled, or imbecile. Not an instance is recorded of a natural death in infancy, childhood, or early manhood. Think about it. In Moses' time, there was no record of that. You have obituary notices in the book of Genesis run thus. All the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died, and Seth 930 years, and he died. Sorry, 912 years, and he died. Think about it. And we celebrate a person who lives to 100 years. No, we do, right? Yes, because it's a big deal. But think about it then. What changed? What happened? And we see that striking change in the time of Christ. It says at the time of Christ's first advent, the race had already so degenerated that not only the old, but the middle-aged and the young were brought from every city to the Savior to be healed of their diseases. So we see the difference from Moses and in the time of Christ. Moses, no records of these diseases. In the time of Christ, a lot of persons were sick. He had to do a lot of healing, right? And many labored under weight of misery during Christ's time. So we see that difference. I found it very profound. I don't know about you, but it says, woman, for example, the woman with the issue of blood. That could be hormonal. We don't know. But you would have, in the time of Moses, compared to that time, we see young ladies, young men with these diseases. All right. So God promises us that obedience will lead to good health. That's a promise that he has given us. In Exodus 15:26, we see that it says, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee. So the Lord says that if there is an obedience in the midst, there is an obedience in the midst, and if we obey, the Lord promises that all the diseases that the Egyptians had, we as a people would not have. So it says, had men always been obedient to the law of the Ten Commandments, carrying out in their lives the principles of those precepts, the curse of disease now flooding the world would not exist. Think about it. And we're going to go into those. I know we have covered the natural laws that govern our life, and I'm going to just browse through that this time as well so that we can keep up to date with those for those who are joining us for the very first time. It says, Christ gave to Israel definite instructions in regard to their habits of life, and he assures them the Lord will take away from thee all sickness. When they fulfill the condition, the promise was verified to them. There was not one feeble person among their tribe. So we see that it's not just lip service, right? It's not just mouth talk. It's actual, it's an actual promise. And how do we, in a time like this where you have the rate of cancer rising like crazy, we have diabetes, hypertension moving downwards. Normally, you have persons in middle age and up having those diseases. Now you have, apart from juvenile diabetes, and that's a different story. But now you have young children having hypertension. I met a little boy, he was 11 at the time, and I saw his mom at the hospital, and his blood pressure was so high. They had to admit him, and he was little. And so these diseases getting um are affecting younger persons. Why? And what are the instructions that the Lord would have given us that we should follow? And let's continue. It says, Psalm 103 says, Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within thee. Bless his holy name. He says, Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. So there are benefits that the Lord gives. What are these benefits? It says, Who forgiveth all thine iniquities and healeth all thy diseases. Yes. So the Lord will do that for us. God's guiding laws. And let's go into that. So it says the violation of physical law with its consequent suffering and premature death has so long prevailed that these results are regarded as a appointed lot of humanity. So it's a, a part of life. I've heard persons say we must die by something, especially when you're talking about food. We have to dead somewhere, there's something that will take you out, you know. But it says that, but God did not create the race in such a feeble condition. So that person who is ill, or their children are ill, maybe have cancer or this, and he said, but God, why? It says that God did not create the world, us in a feeble condition. So this state of things is not the work of providence, but of man. And we're going to go into that and see what that means. It says it has been brought about by wrong habits, by violating the laws that God has made to govern man's existence. Right? So wrong habits. What are these wrong habits? It says God requires of his people continual advancement. We need to learn that indulged appetite is the greatest hindrance to mental improvement and soul sanctification. So the big thing is what? Indulgence of appetite is the biggest thing. We're going to see, here are the laws that I promised I would just go over. We have pure air, and for persons who are locked up in the AC room at work, you come home, you're locked up in your house, pure air. In the nights, you open your window for proper ventilation. Yes, at nights, because you don't want that old air to be recirculating. So you're opening up that window at night. Sunlight. It's amazing that you have people who are in the tropics that suffer from vitamin D deficiency. Because, as I said, you go to work, you're locked up in that dark place, you're at home, you're locked up, you're not getting that sunlight that you need. And as a result of that, there are so many different complications that come with that. In cancer therapy, one of the things is that they go and they get the sun bath every morning. You take off your clothes, maybe have a little towel, if you have neighbor, and you go and you bask in the sun in the early morning so that you can get in those good rays, and you get your vitamin D and also the different benefits, the improvement in mood and so on. All right. Proper diet, temperance, water, having your water, cheerful spirit, abstemiousness or temperance, abstaining from those things that are bad and eating moderately of the things that are good. Exercise, having a proper balanced diet. Exercise, I said that before. Cleanliness, purity of life, cheerful spirit. We have rest. Uh, yeah. So we have rest, and we have trusting God would have fallen under that. These are nature's truest remedies. All right, so God wants to make us whole. How how does he do that? It says, it is impossible for a man to present his body a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, while continuing to indulge in habits that are depriving him of physical, mental, and moral vigor. So you can't deprive your body of these of physical, mental, and moral vigor and expect that you just bring yourself, however, to the Lord. He's a God of order and he's a holy God. And that's what he requires of us. He says, again, the apostle said, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that he may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So, even in wanting that healing, I realize that, it takes a change, a total change in the mindset to overcome these different diseases. I've seen it, and you will realize that not a lot of persons accept it. I've seen persons that I'm working with, you give them a protocol and they follow it to the T and they get the result. And then you have someone else, they just can't. The mind is the mind is not renewed. The mind is stuck in the same way, indulging, continuing with the same habits. And of course, habits are very, very, very hard to break. That's why they're habits, right? But through the Lord, we can break those habits and we can connect with the Lord and get that healing that we um, require. He said, with the majority, their principal anxieties, what shall I eat? What should I eat then? What should I drink? What should I wear? If the tight clothes cause restriction of blood flow, what should I wear? What should I drink? This is so much. I've heard that. Is it notwithstanding all that is said and written in regard to how we treat our bodies, it says appetite, that big one, is the great laws that govern men and women generally. So the appetite, you feel for something. I've seen persons who that are diabetic and they eat the bun, they eat the Pepsi, drink the Pepsi, eat the bun, drink the Pepsi. Easter time, or no, and they're just eating away, and you're like, remember, you have an illness which you don't need that sugar in your body, but they just can't resist because it's that time where you eat the bun and you eat the cheese. But we have to allow logic to govern our bodies and not our appetite. We have to allow the Lord to govern the appetite. All right, so what did you mean, Sister Shrees, by parents pass down these diseases? All right, let's go into it. All right, it says parents bequeath to their offspring their own perverted habits, and loathsome diseases corrupt the blood and enervate the brain. So you'll find out that your parents cooked a certain way, they ate a certain way, and you pick it up, you're like, this is the way, and you continue on and you get the exact same disease. And sometimes we say that, oh, blood pressure runs in the family, high blood pressure runs in the family, or, diabetes runs in the family. So you take your little time, not changing the habits, and just accept it, and then you end up getting it. But you can break that chain. How do you break that chain? Change the habits that were passed down. If you're say the mom or the parent, they cook with a lot of oil, you cook with a lot of oil because that's how your tongue um that's how your tongue normalizes cooking and your mind normalizes cooking. So you cook with a lot of oil or a lot of butter, a lot of sugar, a lot of sweet drinks. So your parents used to buy the big liter, 2 liter bottles of soda, and you want to have your children have that experience. And so you buy that, for your children to have that experience. But no, we have to break those habits. We have to break those chains so that the chain of diseases does not follow us. He says suffering and mortality now prevail everywhere, especially among children. And I'm seeing that a lot. how great is the contrast between this generation and those who lived during the first those 2000. So we see here genetics load the gun and the lifestyle pulls that trigger. I said that before. So we have genetics that are passed down, but we can stop it if we change our lifestyle. So the lifestyle pulls the trigger. We don't have to get certain things. Some persons are, they have the genetics, and you can explain that some more if he's in that position where you have a lack of a certain compound, and so you're more predisposed to cancer. However, you don't have to have cancer if you change the lifestyle. You decide if your grandmother died from cancer, your mommy died from cancer, and you're like, oh my, I'm going to it's a part of my lot. No, it can be changed, and that's the beautiful thing. We have girls now having early menarche, right? As early as 7, they're having a menstrual period. That never used to be so, you know. What has happened? We have the same, what is happening? One, I can tell you two of those of the many reasons. One, the increase in production of or eating of chicken. I think, I don't know about those overseas, but Jamaica, I think KFC has become the national dish, right? And you have a lot of chicken eating, and of course, how they used to do the chicken in the time before is different from now. We have pumping of a lot of antibiotics, a lot of growth factors, and so the child is eating that, the hormone is imbalanced from a young age, and they start having a menstrual period. Another thing is that the high carbohydrates, so the highly refined food. Our parents back in the time, we have to eat our breakfast, which is cooked. We have to eat our lunch, which is cooked. And in between it, if you want to eat something, you have to go and get maybe a little banana or a little orange, and peel it and eat it. Is different now. Children are snacking all the time, right around the clock. And you have the snack bag, and you go and you take up the snacks, and their insulin level is always high. The refined carb, causes a spike in the sugar. The insulin level causes growth, because the body is made to a woman, and once you have a womb, growth takes place. And so that same child have early menarche, and then goes to age 16 and start developing fibroids from there, right? So, but we can break that chain. We can go back to the days where we start paying attention to what our children eat, and what we put into our bodies as well. Habits of cooking, eating, a number of times we eat as well. So we're supposed to eat 3 times a day. If you're on a 2 times a day diet, it depends on you. But 3 times a day you eat breakfast like a king. So that's supposed to be your heaviest meal because you're breaking your fast. You eat your lunch, and then dinner is supposed to be the lightest meal. And it's not supposed to be before we go to bed. But what happened? Everything changed. The breakfast is light, lunch, and dinner is huge. And we have it in the night, and our stomach gets no rest. And we have that spike, and we have that high blood sugar, and the poor cells in the pancreas wear away. And guess what? Later on, you realize that you develop diabetes or high blood pressure or other diseases that are connected to that, all because of the habits. All right. And we all have to have growth. have to grow in these different aspects. All right, so it says some of these diseases, and it's listed metabolic and organ-related disorders like impure blood, and we'll go into that, kidney dysfunction, jaundice, acne, itchy, rashes. I've had a lot of children with rashes and so on. And he said, okay, do this before you try anything. Remove milk and dairy. Dairy, cow's milk, cheese, remove them from the child's diet. From if you're feeding them on formula, change it. Remove those from the diet, and guess what? The eczema, the itchy rash, it goes. Yes, it goes because milk and dairy, they're so allergenic. And many persons, the poor babies, that's the first thing that they get, you know. So those are things that we have to look into and change. And of course, if the mom is diabetic, the baby is at a higher risk of being obese or developing diabetes down the line. So, moms, we have to be careful of what we eat, how we eat when we're pregnant. We don't just eat anything, but we have to be very intentional that we're eating a balanced meal and we also are not eating towards diseases. All right. So asking for healing has to come with a change of behavior. We're going to go into it, we're going to go into these important topics of causes and of diseases and how we can help these causes. All right. So he says, too many of the afflicted ones who received healing, Christ said, sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon thee. Thus he taught that disease is a result of violating God's laws, both natural laws and spiritual. The great misery in the world would not exist did men but live in harmony with the Creator's plan. So when you're healed from a disease, when you go on a natural protocol, when you change your diet, change your lifestyle, and you're praying, you're a man or woman of faith, and you're obeying what the Lord says, when you go on that, you don't turn back. Because now you're getting your body used to being healthy, and so on. Don't turn back. Do not turn back. Just understand that this is your journey. Many persons, as that I'm working with, as the fibroids shrink, guess what? They turn back and start eating again. And like, oh, that went for an ultrasound and this and that. But I'm like, what happened? You were on a great trajectory. What happened? I started eating back because I thought, no, you have to continue on that because it's not only about getting rid of disease. Remember, it's about your overall health. It's about your overall connection with God. You're going back on track in presenting your body holy and acceptable to the Lord, right? Yes. So, so as I said, you must have a change of behavior when you're on the road to healing your bodies. For cancer persons, I've um, seen this testimonial where this lady, she was trying all the natural remedies in that is there is, and she's this and this. But guess what? When they looked, she was still consuming a lot of refined oil, and they found that that was the game changer. That was a hindrance, and removing that from her diet, that was a game changer in her healing process from cancer. All right, so diabetic, I've had diabetics who totally eliminate sugar from their diet. She had she had I think liver issues, but she had diabetes. The doctor put her on a very popular medication, and she had a severe reaction um, to it. And she had to stop, but okay, she's gonna stop the medication. So what next? So she decided that look, no sugar, totally eliminate whites, the refined foods, sugar from her diet, pastry. She had to go on that road, as that dogmatic road. And she said that when she checks her blood sugar levels, it's fine. It's in range and it's good. So as I said, it takes intentionality. It takes you wanting good health to actually stick to have a plan and stick to it so that your body can be healed. Who is to be blamed? It
Uh,
says the human
Trees,
family have brought upon themselves. Yes,
I was saying it's also about the process.
can go ahead.
I was saying it's also about the process of becoming. Too often we focus on the end result and miss what's happening in the middle. And how you do one thing generally translates how you do other things. So the process of
Mm-hmm.
curtailing yourself, the process of, temperance and going on a new regime and changing, just that process alone is to be valued. And that's why a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
you start results and people go back to old habits. And that's not good because we've missed out on the real blessing, which is who we are becoming in the process and how it affects other areas of our character.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you so much. Thank you. It says that the human family have brought upon themselves diseases of various forms by their own wrong habits. So, firstly, if it's not a case where you developed it in the womb, as a baby, then really and truly it's your own wrong habit. So you have to understand, battling a disease, you have to say to yourself, I brought this upon myself. So how can I know, um, be intentional in getting rid of this? Of course, through Christ, because He is a great physician. It says, they have not studied how to live healthfully, and their transgression of the laws of their being has produced a deplorable state of things. The people have seldom accredited their sufferings to the true cause, which is their wrong course of action. That's it. So if you are honest, if you're going through something, I know diseases is, it's always a painful journey. If you're going through something, you said, okay, so firstly, I brought it on myself. So what can I do now to get rid of it? But you have to come to the not this the acknowledgement that it was my fault. He said, diseases never come without a cause. The way is prepared and disease invited by disregard of the laws of health. And that's why we are going through these so that we can share with people that look, there are laws that govern your being. And if transgress, this is what's gonna happen. You're gonna have diseases, right? For example, if you have a flu virus, something as simple as a flu virus, maybe, and you continuously have it every month, maybe you have a flu virus. It could mean that you're deficient in vitamins and minerals, right? So you have to identify, ascertain the cause. Um, because you're having an imbalanced diet, rice and peas and chicken, rice and peas and chicken, little vegetables. You have to, that's not enough. That's not a balanced diet. You can have weakened immunity. What's causing that? Lack of rest that does that. And we have many studies that show that Persons who are night worker, they increase the risk of having or developing cancer is significantly increased, right? Because the lack of rest, you're not sleeping, your body's not getting that opportunity to to rebuild. Intemperance, I explained that earlier. Lack of water, lack of sunshine, and we explained that earlier on. All right. It said the greater number, however, suffer because of their own wrong action. They disregard the principles of eating. So there are principles that govern eating, drinking, dressing, and working. Yes, you can overwork as well. Did you know that? Yes, it said their transgression of natural laws produces the result, the sure result, and when sickness comes upon them, many do not credit their suffering to the true case, but murmur against God because of the affliction. Why me, Lord? Why me? What me do? What did I do? But really and truly, it is because of the wrong course of action that we would have been taking for all these years, the abuse to the body. But God is not responsible for the suffering that follows disregard of natural laws. Intemperate eating is often the cause of disease, and what nature most needs is to be relieved of the undue burden that has been placed upon her. So your body, imagine, for years, you're eating, drinking, you're there, you're living, and you have never say you have never because every day just living you're exposed to toxins and you've never had a cleanse, you've never detox, whatever method, you've never done that before. And guess what? The toxins, they are there. And what they're going to do is find a place to stay. The body's going to try to relieve itself of this burden. So it's going to form little sacs. And these little sacs, it fills them up with the toxins. And later on in life, you do an ultrasound, any diagnostic test, and you see these little sacs, and they say, oh, it's a tumor, or it's cancerous, cancer, you know, and but this is because of neglect all this time. Sometimes we don't know. You don't know. You just don't know that these are things that could be done, right? Because of a lack of knowledge. But here we're doing this series so persons can be informed. And this is a little picture I like. It says, should I eat more vegetables? And the doctor said, let's not jump to conclusion. Here are some pills. So you have the pills, which persons see as lifesavers, but the lifestyle changes um, is not important, or they don't deem important, but it is. Go ahead, Kenil.
I was just saying this is such an important point, the point of taking responsibility,
Yeah.
because something in our psyche, and I'm speaking even about myself, pushes against taking responsibility that, my sickness could be on account of my own doing. That's just not comfortable. But
Mhm.
therein lies the secret to change. You know, the first step is just responsibility and knowing that, hey,
Mhm.
I'm not perfect. My grandma, as much as I love her, even the Jamaican culture, which we celebrate so much, there are many things about it. It's food, for example. And, we just got to come to the point to say, hey, it's my fault. If I wasn't born with it, possibly, I have a doing in it. I like that one that says disease never comes without a cause, but the way it's prepared and it's invited. Imagine inviting disease in my 20s, inviting disease in my 30s and my 40s that finally say, okay, I accept the invitation in my 60s and my 70s. Just
Wow.
that mindset now gives me an uncomfortable feeling at first, but then gives me power to then say, okay, I can co-work with the Lord now to get different results. So
Amen.
we shouldn't overlook that mindset. It's just so.
Yes. Thank you so much. So the main cause is improper diet, irregular meals, and lack of physical exercise. And last week, these were talked about in depth. It said many are suffering and many are going into grave because of indulgence of appetite. So we don't have to, sometimes the death is early. It is because of the appetite. Our bodies crave the good stuff, but we crave, our tongues crave the bad stuff. And so because of that, we develop these diseases and then we unfortunately die younger than we are supposed to, right? So eating what suits the taste. Remember, the taste is perverted from the beginning. We're used to sweets and so on. So it is perverted. And so with that, it weakens the digestive organs and injure the power to assimilate the food that is to sustain life. And you have diseases and death that follows. So we have to pay attention to this. The stomach, for example, is worn out. The body is deprived. The liver is toxic. The kidney is overworked, mainly because of what we indulge in. So it's a big deal. We have to pay attention to that. We have a lot of stomach issues now. It's on the rise. Eat right around the clock, eat a lot, eat anything. And the liver is toxic, right? And when the liver is toxic, remember the liver is the major detoxification organ. We have fat buildup, we have so many offspring, and we have that big D word, which is disease. The world teaches us to change nothing, just take the pharmaceutical medication, but an holistic approach begins with figuring out the cause and correcting what needs correction. And we have intemperance in the home. By the use of rich, unhealthful food, the digestive organs are weakened. So instead of having some boiled potatoes, what do? We have creamy boiled crushed potato with lots of cream, extra mayo. Instead of having simple food, we have highly seasoned food. These are described as rich foods and they're unhelpful to the digestive system, right? So if he said, thus the appetite is educated to crave continually something stronger. So it's like a drug. You eat sweet, next time you want something sweeter, then sweeter. Then when you get something even extremely sweet, it's like nothing. It takes someone to say, no, this is too sweet. Someone who would have been training um, their taste buds. So we have to understand that food is like drugs. One step in the wrong direction prepares the way for another. And this is what just an example of what it can look like. You have your pastries, you have your sweet this, sweet that. We have to be careful. The stomach and the liver, when I'm almost through. Yes, so the stomach and the liver. Acid reflux, stomach ulcers, stomach cancers, and cancers are overall on the rise. Why? Your food should produce good blood when consumed. It should. But when you consume highly refined carbohydrates, you have sugary blood or high blood sugar. High grease and creams, they produce greasy blood, high cholesterol, which gives you high blood pressure, and these tax the liver. So when you have someone having high blood pressure, and you're like, okay, what do you eat? How do you eat? I love my fried fish. I don't eat chicken. I don't eat it. But fries, the creams, the delicacies, the rich food, let me reuse the word, these contribute to the oiliness of the blood. You have to train yourself to relish a plain, simple diet composed of unbolted wheat flour, vegetables, and fruits prepared without spices or grease. You are continually transgressing the law which God has established in your system if you continue. So plain, be like, I, every time he says that, I always laugh, and others laugh. Be at a place where you can go outside. Maybe this is extreme. You eat an aloe like Kenil, and you taste the sweet in the aloe. Okay? Be you're aiming to be there. I haven't tasted the sweet in aloe as yet, but he has tasted the sweet, which is there. You have mannose, which is the sugar that's in aloe, right? And that's a very powerful cancer um, fighting agent, right? But when the tongue is trained, you will have a relish for plain things, plain things. And sometimes you have to reach the point of disease, like having diabetes, and you're like, okay, I need to cut out the sugar, get used to the freshness. It's fine. Your tongue will taste whatever sweetness in the freshness. Yes, it will. Your taste bud regenerates every 10 to 14 days. So if you're going through that withdrawal time, go through it. Go through it. I'm cheering you on through it. Go through that time, because after the 2 weeks, your tongue will be acclimatized to newness. So go through it, I beg you. You know, just stick through it. Yes, it's plain. Yes, it looks simple. Oh, it tastes bad. Yes, it tastes bad, but go through it. Your body will love you for it. Go through the blended greens. For persons who have fibroids, that I'm working with, I tell them go blend up the cruciferous vegetables. Should I use sugar? Please, can I just put a little sugar? No, blend up the cruciferous vegetables. After a while, you will taste the sweetness in the vegetables. And you're like, sweetness in the vegetables? Yes, you will. And after a time, your tongue becomes so in tune with the greens. It don't taste bad again. Yes. So give yourself that space. And this is our testimonial about the importance of keeping the blood clean. So this person came, and she had severe rashes. This is actually a milder form of the rash, right? And it we went through it together. We spoke about how we can overcome that, because the doctors gave her um the anti-allergy pills or medication, and they said that she has to live with it. She has to live on them for the rest of her life. I think it's Allegra or one of them, and she has to live on that for the rest of her life because of the flare-ups. And we went through it together. We were arms in arms together going through this, because I just know that don't sound right, right? You have to live on with you have to live taking something forever, but that's the norm. So I went through, clean out the colon, clean out the liver, clean the blood. She had her green juices, no sugar diet, little to no flesh, food, right? Yeah, she was tempted every now and then and indulge. Um, so, and we went through that, all of that. And she came off the medication totally. And this is to say, if you're going through something, you have to have faith that the changes that you're making, Christ will bless that effort. The changes in the tongue, the changes in the taste, the changes in your diet, the Lord will bless that effort. It says there is no treatment which can relieve you of present difficulties while you eat and drink as you do. Nuh-uh. You have to change. You can do that for yourselves, which the most experienced physician can never do, right? The physician can hand you a pill, but you have to be intentional about changing the lifestyle. It says regulate your diet. In order to gratify the taste, you frequently place a severe tax upon your digestive organs by receiving into the stomach food which is not the most helpful and at times is in immoderate quantities, huge quantities, you know? So we have to, change has to be made. And yes, so I'm winding down. Sometimes, if not most times, we consult taste without reference to health. And that's not good. We have a lady, she had a lot of aches and pains. And I'm telling you that toxin buildup in the body, it can lead to a lot of um, different things. And so we have to, as I said, be we have to be temperate as well as we have to be intentional about putting only good things. And she did a cleanse, and guess what happened? The pain gone. I wasn't even expecting that. But sometimes it's just these toxins. How do you do that? You go through that time, you go through the time, change your diet, change your lifestyle, exercise. It gives off it throws off toxin from the body. Water, it flushes out toxins from the body. Go through that, go through it, and heal and allow the Lord to heal your body naturally. He says, if you could have your eyes open and could see the steps taken in your lifetime to walk right into your present condition of poor health, if you could just see it, if you could just see the step by step, and as I said, I'm seeing a lot of persons around dying from cancer, and it's saddening. It's very saddening. But the indulgences, the little, all right, let me taste peace, and then you finish the whole thing. Yes, we're guilty. But these steps lead to diseases, and we cannot consult the taste. It says, nature, our bodies are made sturdy, and guess what? It bears the abuse. So it's taking in the stuff, getting toxified, taking in the stuff. It's doing that. But guess what? It said nature bears abuse as long as she can without resisting. Then she arises and make a mighty effort to get rid herself of the encumbrances and evil treatment she has suffered. So the body bear that. Over the years, the body bear it, man. But then comes the headache. Then comes the chills. Then comes the fever. Then comes the nervousness, the paralysis, and other evils that comes with it. Then comes all these sicknesses. So after the body gives up, the body's like, okay, I can't deal with this any longer. Too much. And the body gives up, and you have these diseases. Right. It says a wrong course of eating or drinking destroys health, and with it the sweetness of life. We're not joyful in experiencing, your children graduating, our children doing this, growing up and stuff. You're not there for your parents, or your parents are not there for you when, because of the snatching of the life, because of improper eating. How many times have you purchased what you call a good meal at the expense of a fevered system, loss of appetite and loss of sleep? So we purchase those meals, taste good, but it has its negative effects. So this is a step, and improper eating, violation of the natural laws. You go and you go up the rung until you reach the height, which is the peak, sorry, which is the disease. Dyspepsia comes about, and this occurs when indigestion, you have discomfort, pain, burning, bloating, premature fullness while eating. These are some of the symptoms. It says when dyspepsia has resulted from the abuse of the stomach, effort should be made carefully to preserve the remaining strength of the vital forces by removing every overtaxing burden. The stomach may never entirely recover health after long abuse. You hear that? But a proper course of diet will save further debility, and many will recover more or less fully. So the abuse of the stomach, you put in anything, anytime, mix the fruit with the vegetable, you eat right around the clock, the stomach doesn't get to rest. The stomach is just working, 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 working. It doesn't rest at all, at all. And they have dyspepsia that comes about. And that, but as I said, you can recover, not fully, but not fully, but there is hope. All right. And I think this is the last, second to last slide. All right, type of diet. It says those who, after seeing their mistakes, have courage to change their habits will find that the reformatory process requires a struggle and much perseverance. As I was saying earlier, the struggle will be real because, as I said, we're undoing the bad habits that we have done to the body over the time, right? So the struggle will be real. We're not going to say that it's easy, but it's doable. So these are some tips from me. It said prioritize whole nutrient dense plant foods, like your vegetables, your organic fruits, vegetables, legumes, your whole grains, your nuts, your seed. Also, it says these food provide essential vitamins, minerals, fiber, which is a big deal, and phytonutrients that combat inflammation, oxidative stress, and chronic disease. So, for example, you eat your leafy greens like your kale and your spinach, your cruciferous vegetables like your broccoli, your Brussels, your sprouts, which contain sulforaphane and indoles. And for women who are struggling with fibroids and hormonal imbalance, I always say get your greens in, especially the cruciferous vegetables, because they contain what is called indole 3 carbinol, and this mops out the excess estrogen. All right, it mops it, and if you have hormonal cancers like endometriosis, breast cancer, you have to put in your greens, your cruciferous vegetables to be specific, because it creates that mopping of the excess estrogen that's there. So similarly, your berries, your citrus fruits, they deliver antioxidants and anthocyanins, vitamin C, which protects against cellular function for persons that has cancer, cancer prevention. As well, you have your G bombs, that's the acronym, and it's your greens, your beans, your onions, make onions your best friend, your mushrooms, your berries, and your seeds. And it's a useful framework for selecting cancer fighting food, G bombs. You can look it up, it's there, and you can get your, your little food plan or your menu so that you can have those. Optimize, number two, optimize protein intake without animal products. Yes, I said it, without animal products. So contrary to what mainstream says, plant-based diet adequately supports your muscles and your protein needs. All right. If you said you're like your legumes, like your lentils, your chickpeas, your black beans, very rich in protein. Your whole grains like your quinoa, your brown rice, it provide complete amino acid profiles when consuming sufficient variety. So you have it covered. You have it covered. For enhanced protein bioavailability, you can have your sprouted grains and your fermented foods. It depends on your mindset around that, which improve digestion, right? So digestibility of the proteins. For persons who can't take the protein, the beans, you have I don't, it's not a herb, it's a compound. It's called asafoetida. You can get it any health food store. And asafoetida, it does help with those who have bean intolerance. You get that, you put it on your beans, or you can drink it before your beans, having your beans, and you're good to go. Okay. While some argue that plant proteins are inferior to animal sources, I've heard about the carnivorous diet, but studies show that long-term vegan diets correlate with lower risk of heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. So, yeah, the studies are there. Other tips, address key nutrient gaps. This is very important because many, as I said, when you eat a full meal and then you feel hungry, even though your stomach is full, it could be your body communicating to you that, look, if I have a belly full, but I don't have the necessary nutrients that I need. So your responsibility is to ensure that your food is a balanced diet so that it can have the necessary nutrient. And where the nutrients gaps are, you can, of course, you can always supplement or eat foods that are, be more intentional in eating food that are more specific to those. For example, B12, lots of persons have B12 deficiency. Um, and these naturally present in plants. You can do supplementation. You have plant milk, nutritional yeast, there B12 is in them. Omega 3s. How do I take my omega 3s? You have your flaxseed, your chia seed, your walnuts, and these provide good omegas, right? It says sometimes the conversion is inefficient. And you can have your algae-based supplements, which offer, that's a good vegan source. Okay, iron and zinc. A lot of women lack iron, zinc. If you find yourself getting easily sick, it could be zinc deficiency. All the vitamin, even vitamin C deficient. So you pair your iron-rich foods like your spinach and your lentils with your vitamin C to boost absorption. So many persons are taking, you go and you buy the vitamin, the iron, and you don't buy the, and you don't, you're getting the iron, you're buying the iron and you're taking it and you realize that the blood count not going up at all, at all, at all. What is happening? The iron needs vitamin C so that it can be absorbed, right? So you increases absorption. So you need the vitamin C. Okay? And this is, I think that's it. Leverage superfoods. So you have superfoods that you can keep. If you're making your smoothies, you can sprinkle on your food as well. You have like spirulina, your matcha, your akale, right? It offers concentrated nutrients for Jamaica. For us, you have your moringa, the leaves. I didn't remember to put the picture, but we pick the leaves of the moringa and we saute it down just like how you do your callaloo. Yes, and it was so delicious. The children, well, my son at the time loved it. Right? So yeah. Greens, you have your green powder like your kale, your wheatgrass. These are superfood, and you can add chlorophyll and minerals to the smoothies. Your berries, very rich in antioxidants, which is good for your immunity. You have seed powder, like your flax seed, your chia seed, and these, as I said, contribute to Not only your omegas, but your fiber. And I have one slide left. Thank you for your patience. So practice strategic eating pattern. So intermittent fasting, that's a big deal. For persons who are diabetic, there is a program for intermittent fasting, which we've seen that has helped a lot of persons based on we have the theory behind diabetes, which I like that theory, right? So studies link earlier lighter dinners with reduced cancer risk and longevity. Additionally, chewing your raw vegetables thoroughly activate myrosinase enzymes which amplify anti-cancer compounds like sulforaphane. All right. So that's why get up your greens, get your green juice in. On we've had the juicing lady who through juicing she got rid of her cancer. Yes, green juices. So get up your juice and you don't have to wait until you are ill to start doing the right thing, right? Taking the right steps. All right. So, and in closing, indulgence of appetite is the greatest cause of physical and mental debility and lies largely at the foundation of feebleness and premature death. Appetite, the appetite. Let the individual who is seeking to possess purity of spirit bear in mind that in Christ there is power to control the appetite. So if that's a big thing, we can pray, ask the Lord to help us to overcome so that we can choose the right and reject the wrong so that we can be healthy. Right, thanks for having me. Thanks for the extra time. I'm passing over to our host.